In the 13th century, a shadow loomed over the world. Its name, the Mongol Empire. The Mongols were not just conquerors, they were a force of nature, an unstoppable wave that swept across continents, leaving nothing but devastation in their wake. But it wasn't just their armies that struck fear into the hearts of those who heard their name. It was their siege tactics, a terrifying method of war that reduced entire cities to rubble. This was a time when men and women, terrified for their lives, begged for death as a release from the horrors that would be unleashed upon them. Today we're going to explore one of the most brutal, merciless techniques ever employed in warfare, a technique that left cities quaking at the very thought of it and made entire populations plead for mercy. This is the story of the Mongol siege tactics, a terrifying chapter in history that changed the course of civilization forever. Before we begin, if you are fascinated by this dark side of history, don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the most tragic, yet unforgettable events that shaped our world. In this video, we'll delve deep into the Mongol siege techniques that left entire cities begging for death. The first chapter will focus on the brutal tactics used by the Mongol army during their sieges. We will explore the psychological warfare, the relentless brutality, and the systematic methods they employed to crush the will of their enemies. It wasn't just the destruction of the city that terrified those caught in their path. It was the way the Mongols took everything that made a society and turned it to dust. Then, we'll move to the wider impact of these sieges on the world. It's easy to look at the Mongols as just conquerors, but the effect their sieges had on the societies they destroyed was far-reaching. The impact was not just physical. Entire cultures were erased, and the psychological scars left on the surviving population were deep. The Mongol siege tactics were not just about taking land, they were about creating a legacy of fear that would echo through the ages. The Mongol Empire's rise was swift and terrifying, carving through the ancient world with a relentless hunger that showed no mercy. Genghis Khan, the man behind the Mongol onslaught, had a vision of a world unified under his rule, but it was not a vision built on diplomacy or subtlety. It was forged in blood. And at the heart of that brutality lay their siege techniques, methods so horrifyingly effective that entire cities would rather burn than face what came next. When a Mongol army approached a city, the first step was always psychological warfare. They knew that breaking the spirit of a people was just as important as breaking their walls. Their reputation for cruelty was enough to set the stage. Stories of entire populations being slaughtered, of cities reduced to ash, spread like wildfire across the empire. News of Mongol forces advancing sent waves of panic through the people. It was not just the certainty of death that they feared, it was the utter annihilation of everything they had ever known. The Mongols were brilliant tacticians. The very idea of a siege, which had once been a drawn-out battle of attrition, was transformed under their hands into a swift, merciless affair. They employed a network of spies, infiltrating cities long before they arrived. They gathered intelligence, assessed weaknesses, and once the siege began, they made sure there was no way out. Every move they made was designed to break their enemies both physically and mentally.
But it wasn't just the strategy that made the Mongol siege so terrifying. It was the execution. The Mongols would often start by encircling a city completely, ensuring that no reinforcements or supplies could get in or out. This was a slow form of suffocation. The people inside the city were starved, isolated, their resources dwindling to nothing. The Mongols understood that hunger was a weapon. As the days wore on, morale inside the city crumbled. The citizens, desperate and frightened, began to see their survival as a distant dream. They knew that once their food ran out, death was inevitable. And yet, the Mongols were only just beginning. One of the most terrifying aspects of their siege warfare was their use of psychological manipulation. They would often begin by displaying the bodies of those who had already been killed, sending a clear message: no one would escape alive. When the Mongols captured a city, the people knew that there was no mercy to be had. Those who surrendered would often face execution, a brutal and horrifying death that served as a further warning to others. The Mongols used decapitated heads as a display, piles of them stacked high in public squares. It wasn't just a tactic of terror, it was a statement of their unyielding dominance. But perhaps the most gruesome tactic the Mongols employed was their use of siege engines, large mechanical devices designed to tear down the fortifications that protected the city. These engines were capable of launching massive projectiles, including flaming arrows and large stones, that would breach the walls and create openings for the Mongol forces to pour in. But the Mongols weren't content with simply breaking the city. They made sure that once the walls came down, the horror was unrelenting. They would flood the city with their warriors, sweeping through the streets like a tide, and anyone caught in their path was either killed or enslaved. If the city managed to hold out for a time, the Mongols didn't just wait them out. They devised new methods of siege. They would construct towers to scale the walls, and once those towers were in place, they would assault the defenders with precision and speed. The Mongol army's mobility, its ability to adapt, was unparalleled. This was not a drawn-out war of attrition. It was a massacre, swift and brutal, designed to overwhelm and destroy. But the true horror of the Mongol siege was not only in the physical destruction, it was in the suffering they left behind. Entire populations, the elderly, the sick, the children, all would be swept up in the madness. Cities that had once been thriving centers of commerce, culture, and life were turned into graveyards. The air would be thick with the stench of death, the cries of the dying, the wails of families torn apart. Perhaps the most infamous of these sieges was the capture of Nishapur in 1221, where the Mongols, after a long siege, massacred every inhabitant, men, women, and children. The scale of the bloodshed was so enormous that it became a legend. It was said that the streets were lined with the bodies of the dead, and the Mongols even reported that the rivers ran red with blood. This wasn't just a conquest. It was the obliteration of everything that had ever made these cities whole. For the people caught in these sieges, death became a fate they would beg for. Some chose to take their own lives rather than face the horrors of Mongol captivity. Others surrendered, hoping that their submission would save them from the worst, only to find that their lives would be taken anyway. There was no escape from the Mongol terror once it descended. To survive was often worse than dying, and many wished for the sweet release of death instead of facing what the Mongols would do to them.
As the Mongols advanced across the world, their sieges left scars that rippled through the societies they conquered. The destruction of entire cities wasn't just a physical event, it was a psychological one. The effects of their brutal tactics reached beyond the immediate aftermath of battle, leaving a legacy that shaped the very course of history. The survivors, broken and battered, would carry with them memories of terror, of destruction, and of helplessness. Entire cultures were erased or reduced to mere shadows of their former selves, their languages, customs, and histories obliterated. And yet, in the ruins, something deeper was left behind, a culture of fear that would echo for centuries to come. The psychological toll on the survivors of Mongol sieges was profound. Those who lived through these traumatic events often found themselves living in a world that had changed irrevocably. Cities that once flourished with life, trade, and knowledge were now ghost towns, silent, ruined, and empty. The survivors were left with the emotional scars of having watched their loved ones butchered, their homes razed to the ground, and their way of life completely destroyed. The Mongols didn't just conquer, they wiped out entire civilizations, leaving only their twisted version of history in the wake. In the wake of a Mongol siege, entire regions were left depopulated. In some cases, the Mongols not only slaughtered the inhabitants, but also took many as slaves, forcing them to work in faraway lands or as part of the Mongol military. The Mongols believed that those they captured could be useful tools in furthering their empire, and they did not hesitate to use them for their own ends. But this also meant that the cultural fabric of these cities, their traditions and knowledge, was often lost or forcibly assimilated into the Mongol way of life. But the psychological toll didn't end with the destruction of cities or the capture of slaves. The fear the Mongols spread became a powerful tool in its own right. Cities, even those not yet touched by the Mongol wrath, would begin to turn on one another, paranoid and desperate to avoid the same fate. In some cases, the fear of the Mongols led to alliances between factions that would have otherwise remained enemies. This unity, born out of shared terror, was not a source of strength, but a sign of how deeply the Mongols had altered the political landscape. The very existence of the Mongol threat created an atmosphere of dread that would persist long after their armies had moved on. The Mongols were also adept at using terror to maintain control over their newly acquired territories.
Even in cities that were not directly attacked, their influence could be felt. The sight of a Mongol army on the horizon was enough to cause entire populations to submit without a fight. The Mongol Empire expanded so quickly in part because of the fear that preceded it. It wasn't just about military might. It was about creating an atmosphere where resistance seemed not only futile, but dangerous. Cities that once defied the Mongols quickly realized that submission was often the only way to ensure their survival. In some instances, rulers would surrender their cities in exchange for their lives, knowing that defiance would lead to total destruction. But the psychological effects weren't only felt by those who lived under Mongol rule. The legend of their siege tactics spread far and wide, creating a lasting fear that lingered long after the last Mongol had left a region. As the years went by, stories of the Mongol siege grew, turning into myth and legend. Tales of the Mongols' brutality were told not just by survivors, but by those who had heard of them from a distance. The mere mention of their names sent chills down spines. And this fear became part of the legacy they left behind, a legacy that would influence how people viewed power, conquest, and warfare for centuries to come. Even more than just fear, the Mongols left behind a new understanding of military strategy. Their siege techniques were studied by future military leaders, and their tactics became a part of the military doctrine that would shape the future of warfare. The Mongols understood the importance of logistics, the use of spies, and the power of psychological warfare, lessons that were learned the hard way by those who found themselves in their path. The Mongol siege didn't just break cities, it redefined the art of war. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of the Mongol sieges was the way in which they reshaped the world map. Entire empires fell under their onslaught, and new empires were born in the aftermath. The Mongol Empire would eventually fracture into smaller khanates, but the world they left behind was forever altered. The Mongol sieges were not just an end to the cities they destroyed, they were the beginning of a new era in world history, one defined by the lasting influence of Mongol rule.
The stories of those who lived through the Mongol sieges, those who begged for death rather than face the horrors of captivity, haunt us still. Their suffering was not just physical, it was spiritual, psychological, and cultural. Their cities, their communities, their lives were erased in a storm of fire and steel, never to return. And yet, despite the unimaginable brutality, there's a strange sense of awe in the legacy the Mongols left behind. They changed the world not just through their conquests, but through the sheer terror they inspired. They left a mark on history that will never be forgotten. A reminder that in the face of such overwhelming force, survival becomes an act of defiance against the darkest forces of human nature. As the Mongol Empire eventually waned and its reign of terror began to crumble, the shadow of their sieges still loomed large over history. The cities they obliterated, the people they enslaved, and the cultures they destroyed became a sobering reminder of the catastrophic toll that war, when wielded with such cold brutality, can have on human civilization. The Mongols may have forged one of the largest empires the world has ever seen, but it was built on the bones of those who fell before their terrifying military machine. The psychological toll of their siege tactics cannot be overstated. In the cities they captured, survivors were left to rebuild not just their homes, but their sense of safety and trust in the world. The Mongols showed humanity just how fragile a civilization could be, how quickly a city that once teemed with life could become a graveyard, how swiftly fear could paralyze entire populations into surrender. For those who witnessed the horrors, the Mongol sieges became a brutal lesson in the cost of defiance, and an even harsher reminder of what it meant to be caught in the maw of history's most efficient conquerors. But beyond the pain and devastation, the legacy of the Mongol sieges also left a deep imprint on military strategy. The Mongols had an understanding of warfare that transcended simple brute force. They utilized psychological tactics, logistics, and intelligence in ways that were ahead of their time. Their mastery of siegecraft would influence generations of military leaders who followed. It was not just the Mongols' ability to destroy that defined them. It was their ability to shape the course of history with precision and fear. In this respect, their legacy continued far beyond their empire. Yet even as their influence spread, the terrifying tactics they employed could not be forgotten. The Mongol siege had a lasting impact on the societies that endured it. Entire populations were scarred for generations, their lives forever altered by the brutality they had witnessed. Their suffering became part of the dark fabric of the Mongol legacy, a legacy that was not just of conquest, but of the deep and lasting damage that such unchecked power can cause. The Mongol siege tactics were not only a means of conquest, but they were a testament to the terrifying power that could be wielded when an army understood the true cost of breaking the human spirit. They shattered the world, and in doing so, they left behind a legacy that would echo in every subsequent chapter of history. Their power, their brutality, and their psychological warfare set a precedent for the future of warfare. And yet, as time marches on, we remember them not just for the destruction they brought, but for the fear they instilled, a fear that transcended borders, cultures, and time. The Mongol sieges were not just about the cities they razed, but about the way they reshaped the very nature of power and conquest. Their siege tactics may have come to an end with the fall of the Mongol Empire, but the terror they wrought will never fade from history. And in that terror, we find a sobering truth, that history is often written in blood, and some legacies, though dark, endure forever. Thank you for watching. If you found this story of destruction and survival haunting, don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, stay curious, because history is never as far behind us as we might think.